नमस्कार बच्चों, आप सभी को इस वर्चुअल क्लास में एक और बार स्वागत है। टुडे इन दिस क्लास वी विल बी डिस्कसिंग अबाउट द चैप्टर एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. So here you can see that first of all we need to understand the meaning of employment. What do you mean by employment? So employment says that whenever a person, an individual person, he is engaged in an activity which enable him to earn some earnings. That means for his livelihood he is doing some activity through which he is earning some money. So normally when we classify these activity, that activity can be called as what? Productive activity or economic activity. So to understand the concept of employment, we need to distinguish between the economic activity and the productive activity. So here we will make some difference between the economic activity and the productive activity. So when you talk about the productive activity is a small component of a economic activity, because the economic activity involves in the production, consumption and the expenditure. So when we talk about the productive activity and economic activity, so as we have read earlier that economic activity can be further classified as the production, then it leads to what? The income generation, then again we have the consumption or the expenditure. So these three activities we can see in our economy in a circular way. That is the cyclic activities, where we can consider these three activities as an economic activity. But productive activity, when you talk about the productive activity, it involves only in the production process. So here when you talk about the employment, that shows that all those person or the individual who are engaged in the production of an goods and services in an economy, they are being called as what? The workers, or the person who is being employed in some economic activity. So here we need to understand the concept of worker. Who is a worker? So we have a question in our mind that who is a worker? So as I told you, worker is a person who is ready to work and who is being involved in an economic activity or involved in the production activity through which he is able to make a good and services in the economy. So by producing or by engaging in the production process, by engaging himself in the process of production of goods and services, he contributes to the GDP, that is the gross domestic product or the national income. And apart from that, he also earn for himself for his livelihood. So here we can understand the meaning of worker. Now what we need to do, we need to classify the workers. How the worker can be classified in our economy. So now we'll see about the classification of workers. So when we classify the workers, classification of workers. So how we can classify the workers? So when I am talking about the classification of workers, so when we classify the workers, so these workers can be classified on the basis of what? Two categories, that is the self-employed workers and the second one is what? Hired workers. So, so by this we can very easily understand who are the self-employed workers and the hired workers. So as we have seen that the workers can be classified into two categories, two types, that is self-employed workers and the hired workers. So here what do you mean by self-employed workers? The self-employed workers are those persons who are engaged in the economic activity which are being completely managed and controlled by themselves. That means those persons who are running their own business and they get the reward as profit, the part of profit as their reward for doing that business, they are these self-employed workers. But apart from that, we have the second one, that is hired workers. So who are the hired workers? Hired workers are those workers who used to engage in the economic activity which are being carried out and which are being managed by some other employer. So they used to work as the employee in that businesses or in that production activity. And again, the hired workers can be further classified as the two category. That is, here we can classify them as casual workers and the regular workers. So the what do you mean by casual workers? Casual workers are those workers who are engaged for a short period of time. So those persons who are involved in the production activity for a short period of time, so they are not being engaged for a long period of time as a regular worker, and even they are not eligible for getting any kind of social security schemes provided by the employer. And apart from that, when we talk about the regular workers, they are the permanent employees engaged in the production process for a long period of time, or they are being engaged for a continuous period. And again, as I told you, here the regular workers are eligible to get the social security schemes. So those kind of insurance schemes which are being provided by the employer to the employees. So these are the some classifications of workers where these people are engaged in the production activity. Okay students, after studying about the meaning of the workers and the classification of workers in the economy, now we will study or we will see about the size of workforce in our country. So next thing, now we'll see about the size of workforce in India. So when we talk about the size of workforce, it indicates the percentage of people or percentage of population engaged in the employment activity. So in our country, nearly 40 crore people are being engaged in the production process, or we can say that they are the employed population in our country. So based on that, we have some data. Look at the data carefully. About 70% of workforce comprises of male workers and only 30% of workers are female workers. And nearly 70% of workforce is found in rural area and urban workforce is only 30% in the total. Then the female workforce out of the total in rural area is nearly 30%, while it is only 20% in the urban area. So students, after seeing this data, a question arises in our mind that why there is a large number of workforce is engaged in our rural area. So that means we can assume that the rural area is contributing more in our national income, or we can say that the contribution provided by the rural area, rural India to our GDP is more than the urban area. But it is not true. Though we have large number of workforce from the rural area in the production process, even though the contribution made to the GDP is being mostly done by the or largely done by the urban workforce. So what is the reason? What is the reason? That means what? Here in rural area, we can see the type of a disguised unemployment. That means what? The place where a few number of people are being required to do a certain work or certain productive activity, at that place more number of people are being engaged in the production process. So because of that, the workforce which is present in our rural area is more than the urban area, though the contribution made by the rural area is less than the urban area. By this data, one more question arises in our mind, that why the contribution of female workforce is less in our country. So here we will study what is the reason behind the low percentage of female workforce in our country. The reason is what? The female employment is lesser than the male employment. And apart from that, mostly the female workers or the females are being engaged in their family works. And apart from that, the employment opportunity or the employment provided to the female workers are lesser than the male workers. So So that is why we can see that the contribution or the percentage of participation or the females engaged in the productive activity is lesser than the male workers. Okay, students, after seeing about the size of workforce in our country, now we will study about the rate of participation of this workforce in our country. So in a productive activity. So we will see. So we will see the rate of participation in India. So here we will discuss about the participation of this workforce in the productive activity. It refers to the participation of people in productive activity and it is measured as the ratio of workforce of total population of the country. So what are the observation we can see here? The rate of participation for the urban area is about 47.2% in 2013 to 14. And the rate of participation for the rural area is about 54.7% in 2013 to 14. In urban area, the rate of participation is about 73.8% for men and 18.5% for women. In rural area, the rate of participation is about 74.7% for men and 29.1% for women. And overall, the rate of participation in the country is about 52.5%. Okay, students, after seeing about the rate of participation of our workforce in our country, now we'll study about the occupational structure. So now we'll see about the occupational structure. So in the occupational structure, we will study about the distribution of our workforce in three different sectors of our economy. So students, when we are talking about the three different structures, you can recall the previous classes where what we have studied that we can divide these economic sectors as the primary sector, then the secondary sector, at last we have one more sector, that is tertiary sector. So here what we can understand from these three sectors, the primary sectors, so primary sectors involves in the production process which involved in the economical activities like agriculture, the mining and the fishings. That means what? Those activities which are directly involved in the extraction of resources from the nature itself. So they are being considered as the primary sector. So those people who are involved in the economic activities which are related with these activities are being considered as the primary sector. What do you mean by secondary sector? Secondary sector, the resources which are being extracted by the primary sector from the nature, they are being further processed and the value is being added in that commodity, or we can say that those manufacturing activities which uses the raw material derived from the primary sector are being considered as the secondary sector. And at last we have the one more sector, the tertiary sector, that is the sector which provides the services. So here we will study about the occupational structure of our country based on the distribution of workforce in these three sectors. So when we study about the occupational structure, first of all we will study about the distribution of workforce as the rural and urban distribution. So we will study about the occupational structure of our rural and urban India. So first of all we will study about the rural and urban workforce. So students, to understand the occupational structure of our rural and urban workforce, look at the table given here. So in this table, we can see the distribution of rural and urban workforce across different sectors of the economy. So data is given for the year 2015 to 16. Here you can see that the distribution of workforce in three different sectors are given in bar diagram. So in this bar diagram, we have three colors. that is a black color. Black color indicates the primary sector. Then we have a dark pink color that denotes the secondary sector. And there is a one more bar is given here in a light pink color that denotes the tertiary sector. So here you can see two bars given here. So in the x-axis and y-axis we can see that in y-axis the data has been given in percentage, the percentage of workforce engaged in our rural and urban area. So here when we see the bar diagram of urban area, here we can see that only 7.8% of workforce is engaged in primary sector and 28.9% is engaged in the secondary sector, whereas the most of the urban workforce is engaged in the tertiary sector that contributes nearly about 63.3 percentage. And now look at the bar diagram which indicates the workforce of rural area. Here we can see that 58.5% of workforce is engaged in the primary sector, whereas 19.5% of workforce is engaged in the secondary sector and 22% of workforce is engaged in the tertiary sector. Okay, students, after studying about the distribution of workforce in rural urban areas, now we will see the distribution of workforce as the male and female workforce. Female workforce distribution in different sectors of our economy. So here again, to understand the distribution of male and female workforce in our different sectors of an economy, look at a diagram again. So again in this diagram, a bar diagram is given. So with the help of this bar diagram, we can understand the distribution of male female workforce across different sectors of an economy. Here, so students, look at the diagram carefully. Here we have again x-axis and y-axis. In y-axis we have the percentage of the workforce engaged in both male workforce and the female workforce. So first of all we see the first bar. So in this bar again the primary sector is been given in a dark color, and again then the secondary sector is given in a pink color, and tertiary sector is given in a light pink color, and again the other sectors, the workforce which are engaged in the other sectors are given. So in a lighter pink color, the other sector is being given. So look at the male workforce. Here in the male workforce, 45% of male workforce is engaged in the primary sector, whereas in secondary sector 19.1% of male workers are engaged in the secondary sector, and 25.3% of male workforce is engaged in the tertiary sector, and at last 10.6% of male workers are engaged in the other sectors. Now look at the second bar. Here 57.3% of female workforce is engaged in the primary sector, whereas 14.9% is engaged in secondary sector and 18.9% is engaged in the tertiary sector, and apart from that 9.6% of female workforce is engaged in the other sectors. So what we can find here, a huge percentage of female workers is engaged in the primary sector, since primary activities of production are confined largely to the rural area. It implies that huge number of percentage of female workers in rural area are engaged in primary activities. Okay students, so far we have studied about the employment and the classification of workers, and apart from that we have studied about the workforce and the type of workforce in our country. And after this, now we will study about the problem of unemployment. So now when we study about the unemployment, we need to understand the meaning of unemployment. So who are unemployed and what is meant by unemployment? When we talk about the unemployment, we need to understand who is unemployed. A person is considered as unemployed when he is ready to work, he is willing to work, at the prevailing wage rate in the economy, but even though he is not getting the work or he is not getting the job to earn. So that is the situation where when a person is ready to work but he is not getting enough job or he is not getting any economic activity to get his earning in the economy. So here again, when you talk about the problem of unemployment, the unemployment can be further classified as two category. How we can classify them? The unemployment can be classified as rural unemployment and the urban unemployment. So here, when you study about these unemployment, these two categories, rural unemployment, urban unemployment, so how we can study the types of unemployment which prevails in these two sectors. First one, that is rural unemployment. In the rural unemployment, as we know that in rural area, most of the people who are engaged in the production activity, they are basically engaged in the primary sector. So the primary sector, it consists of what? The agricultural activities. So when it's related with the agricultural activities, again these unemployment which prevails in the rural area, so they can be classified as seasonal, unemployment and disguised unemployment. So let's discuss what you mean by seasonal unemployment and the disguised unemployment. So here in the seasonal unemployment, here when a person is engaged in the agricultural activity, we know that mostly our agricultural activities are depend upon the rain or the availability of water. Due to non-availability of water and irrigation facility, here most of the time, or we can say that nearly 4 to 5 months, the workforce which are engaged in the agriculture sector, they remain jobless or they do not get any kind of productive activity, or they are not involved in the any kind of productive activity in the economy. So during some portion of a year, they remain unemployed. And whereas in disguised unemployment, as I told you earlier, that here in this unemployment, we can see that more number of people or more number of workforce is engaged in such kind of activity where the need for the workforce is lesser. The engagement of workforce is more than the actual requirement. That means if two persons are involved in the production activity or in the agriculture activity in a rural area, at that time here we can see that the work of two persons are being done by nearly 4 to 5 persons, where we can see that more number of workforce or more number of people are engaged in those kind of activity, those kind of economic activity, those kind of productive activity in the agriculture sector, where the actual requirement of people is less. So this kind of unemployment can be seen in our rural area. So now we'll see about the urban unemployment. Here we can see that the urban unemployment can be classified as, again it is classified as two category, that is industrial unemployment and educational unemployment. Educational unemployment. So in industrial unemployment, we can see that the illiterate peoples, mostly the illiterate peoples in the urban area, they used to face such kind of unemployment who are being involved in the production activities in the industrial sector or in the manufacturing sector. So students, apart from these rural and urban unemployment, We have seen that in rural we have the seasonal unemployment and the disguised unemployment, and in the urban sector we have the industrial unemployment and the educational unemployment. And students, apart from these, we have some common type of unemployment in our economy which prevails in different sectors of our economy. So here we will see one by one what are the common type of unemployment which could be seen our which could be seen. So friends, after this we study about the suggestions to solve the unemployment in our country. So we'll list out some steps taken by the government and the solution given by the economists to solve the problem of unemployment in our country. Now we'll see the suggestions to solve the problem of unemployment in India. First one, increase in production. To increase employment, it is essential to increase production in agriculture and industrial sector. Then, increase in productivity. Demand for labor is directly related to the productivity of labor. High rate of capital formation. The rate of capital formation in the country should be increased, and also investment must be directed to such area of production where employment potential is high. Then helps to self-employed person. So the government should provide facilities like irrigation, better seeds, manures, implements, credit facility to small and marginal farmers. Then educational reforms. There is an urgent need for educational reforms in the country. Only such students be admitted to colleges and universities who intend to pursue their studies with some specific objectives. Emphasis should be placed on vocational education. Then, technique of production. The technique of production should be suit the need and means of the country. It is essential that labor-intensive technology is encouraged in place of capital-intensive technology. Then, cooperative industries. Cooperative industries should be encouraged as far as possible. And at last, there are some government policies and programs which are implemented by the government to eradicate the problem of poverty and unemployment in the country. So in that one, Skill India program, Make in India program, Startups programs are the recently launched campaigns by the government of India to generate opportunities of employment in the country. Okay students, that's all for today. So based on today's learning, I have given some homework and I hope you can do this homework very easily, and in case of any doubt you can contact us. Okay friends, that's all for today. We will meet in the next episode with the concept of infrastructure. So until then, keep learning, stay safe, stay alert. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.